frames there, and we put them together with glue, and you're more than welcome to buy some for your kids, your grandkids, or yourselves. It's just like planes you had many years ago, and also there's tanks. We have 900 of them. They were given to us by somebody. They're made in 1960s, so there's lots of boxes there, and we've got more. And so you got to find a present for somebody that'd be a good present to buy. There's prices on all of them, and they're very reasonably priced. A second thing is over at a table by the doughboy, there's a guy standing up. Please stand up, raise your hand. There's two librarians from the Evansville Public Library, and they're war historians. So if you want any searches done from Evansville, we've got a database that goes back to about 1880. They can search it for you. So you go over there and talk to them after the talk today, and they'll be glad to do some searches for you on anything you might need. They're an outreach program from the library. So love to have it. Goes back to 1848, so that'll cover most of your history. The last thing is what's Jack Button mentioned is 82 years ago today, we started the biggest war we ever had. We hope another war doesn't ever start like that. But that day, everybody hears about the USS Oklahoma or USS Arizona. But the USS Oklahoma was also sunk that day, and we have an individual named Wilcox in our exhibit, our World War II exhibit, and his DNA was found. He was only 17 at the time when his ship went down, but they did a DNA evaluation back in 2016, and his whatever remains he had, he was buried here, and there's a large celebration here to his benefit. So if you have a chance, he's a Pearl Harbor death 82 years ago. So we're very glad to have all of you. 2 weeks from now, we're going to have a Holocaust talk. That's what that big room is. That's 14 feet by 14 feet by about 13 feet high. 10 people have been working on it for a year. It's going to be only Holocaust exhibits around that are stationary is up there in Terre Haute. Not any other one closer. So we're going to make an impact here of something that never should have happened on the planet Earth. And then a month from now is a person named John Lawrence. John Lawrence is probably the #1 archivist in Evansville. He has his own library or his own little museum out at USI. He archives things from about 500 BC on, and so he's the #1 archivist in Evansville. He's going to talk, so I think you'd really like it. He'll be the first Thursday in January. So I'm going to be quiet, and here comes Tom to introduce him.
Thank you, Doc. Appreciate it. As I said earlier, we have a lot this morning that we were trying to accomplish, so bear with us. This is the first time the Evansville Wartime Museum is going to present something like this. We're going to have two people here as speakers. Today, our program is about the Vietnam War, and we were lucky to have two gentlemen step forward to give us a presentation today. The first one that we're going to have today, if he wants to go ahead and head this direction, this is Bob Vieth. He was in the Army during the Vietnam War, and he was in the thick of it. And we have another gentleman, his name is Mike Leonard, and he's in Reno, Nevada today. If you look real closely, you actually can see him. He's waving at us. We're going to include him in our first part of the presentation because he may interlude into this with Bob. So without due respect here, I want to hand the floor over to this gentleman standing next to me. And oh, by the way, we handed out some pamphlets this morning. That's their bio. If you look at your pamphlets, we decided not to go through and take the time to go through all this in the introduction. So you have a bio on both these gentlemen right there. And I'm going to give the floor over to Bob. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here. Mike and I really look forward to this presentation. I think we tried to coordinate it on Zoom meetings, and I believe I'll be the one that's going to first lead it off. So I'm going to move the slide. Maybe I'm on the... There we go. First of all, I'd like somebody to explain to me the new math I was in Vietnam over 50 years ago, and I think I'm only 40 years old. So I wish someone would explain that to me. It doesn't seem like it was 50 years ago, but time passes fast. I was light weapons infantry. I was drafted. And what I'd like to do is give you an indication of where I was on the map. I know a lot of the Vietnam movies and photos are of rice paddies and the lowlands, but actually Vietnam's got quite a mountain range on its western side. The first part of it was called the I Corps, and the Marines were up by the DMZ, and I was down here in the southern part of the I Corps, and that was called the Central Highlands. And on the South China Sea side, you have beautiful beaches. And most people don't know this, but I often thought when I was over there that if they could stop the war, get some real estate developers in here, that was just really a beautiful area. And then as you move west, then you hit what I call the lowlands, and that's where you have all your rice paddies and a lot of villages in the woodline. And you keep moving west, and there's a big mountain range that comes down here. We did patrols in that total area. In other words, one day we might be in the rice paddies, and maybe the next morning they would helicopter us into the mountains. And so then we were in mountainous territory, and we were going to be out here for several weeks, could be 2 to 3 weeks' time. And what we had to do is be prepared. And I'd like to show you, next slide.
You know what you're doing there?
What most people aren't aware of is the things we had to carry, particularly if we were in the mountains for 2 or 3 weeks time period. First of all, in mountains I would carry 20 clips from my M16. I was rifleman. It had 18 rounds in each clip. That was 360 rounds from my rifle that I was carrying. In addition to that, I was probably most time carrying another 100 rounds for the machine gun, the M60 machine gun. We also had a rucksack. It's not in this photo, it'll be in the next. You can see the straps. In the rucksack is where we carried personal items, letters from home, which we read several times over a couple days. Mail meant so much to us. And when we were finally finished with them, we would burn them. And the reason we would burn the letters was in case we were killed or a rucksack wound up in the enemy's hands, we did not want our home addresses available to them. So all the letters I got from home were eventually destroyed and were burned.
What's that?
We also carried the rucksack, not everybody, but each secure position when we set up at night would have a claymore mine. And there's one sitting up here, and I understand that those were manufactured here in Evansville. And what we would do is we would set those claymore mines out in front of our position, and there was a wire that came back to our foxhole. We dug in. Every night we dug in. And if we had enemy movement, we had that claymore mine that we could set off, which could just be devastating for the enemy. what we had to be very careful of is that I always tried to keep those claymore mines from my position within my sight range. Because if the enemy ever got close enough and turned them around, he would start making noise and we'd be blowing all the shrapnel back at us. And I want to tell you, the North Vietnamese soldiers they were either really brave or really crazy. I don't know which, but they were really dangerous. Along with the rucksack, that item right there is a grenade that is a smoke grenade. We carried both smoke grenades and fragmentation grenades. We were lost so many times in the mountains that we would have to pop smoke for the colonel who was in his helicopter above us to locate where in the heck we were. And many times he'd come over the radio saying, "You're in the wrong place." And so half the time I think we were lost. And sometimes he'd have to come in, he'd have to prepare a landing zone to get them in. And he would shuttle us to where we were supposed to send the knife on top of a hilltop. And then we would have to dig in and set up our claymore mines, our trip flares, and things like that. It's just amazing. People think that you would know where you were in the mountains with all the technology we had. We tried to travel the proper route, and we couldn't do it. It was just too difficult. So we'd veer off of it. And many times we were making our own trail in the mountains. But if we came upon a trail and we started using it, we knew that trail was made by the North Vietnamese for resupply and infiltration into the south. So if we were traveling that trail, and if you were the man on point, you had to be really careful that you didn't walk into an ambush. Because those trails and those mountains belong to the NVA, the North Vietnamese. They didn't belong to us or the South Vietnamese. They were owned by the North Vietnamese. That's where all their base camps and so forth were. The other thing, when I walk point in the mountains, what I try to do is pay attention to nature, where the birds chirping, was there activity? If there was a good chance everything was okay up front yet. But if it was silent, you had to sharpen up your senses right away because you were not sure what the heck was around the next bend. So you had to pay attention to what the heck nature was telling you. Contrary to on the beach area and the lowlands, they were full of booby traps. So if you were walking point in the lowlands, the point man was watching for booby traps and tripwires, and the second man was watching for enemy activity. If you're walking point in the lowlands, you try to stay off the dikes between the rice paddies, because that's where the booby traps would be. So most time we were wading through rice paddies instead of walking on dry ground. And when you came to a hedgerow, you never followed the trail through a hedgerow. There was a good chance it was going to be booby trapped. We always tried to cut our way through the hedgerow because they couldn't booby trap the whole hedgerow. So booby traps really could be a disaster in the lowlands, but in the mountains, you didn't have to worry so much about those, but then you had ambushes. One of our companies, Charlie Company, I was in the Alpha Company, just to show you what their base camps were like. Charlie Company was following a trail. They were on the next ridge from us. They walked right into an enemy base camp. Both sides discovered each other at the same time. So both our soldiers and the NVA were just surprised when it started. Their bunkers were built into the ground so well you could not see them until you were almost on top of them. And so Charlie Company walked in there, and pardon my language, but all hell broke loose. And we could hear this firefight going on the ridge in front of us, but there wasn't anything we could do about it because we could not go down the valley and get up there in time. And I think Charlie Company really suffered a lot of casualties in that firefight. And we watched some of the enemy soldiers exit their base camp going down the ridge. We started shooting at them, but they were really too far out of our range to get an accurate shot on them. But in the mountains, we were fighting North Vietnamese army. And we called them Mr. Charles, was our nickname for them. And the reason is because they were an army like us. They wore army uniforms. They were trained, and they were going to stand and fight. In most of the lowlands, we were fighting what was called Viet Cong. And the Viet Cong were South Vietnamese soldiers who were fighting against South Vietnamese army. They were more of a guerrilla force. They would hit you and run, ambush you and run. The techniques that were used were different depending upon which enemy we were fighting. And the North Vietnamese soldiers usually had AK-47s, which is a very accurate weapon. It'd be accurate like our old M1s and M14s. And it had such a cracking sound to it that when you heard it, it just drove you down to the ground. In the meantime, our M16 sounded like a .22 rifle, so it had no effect on them except for where the bullets were going. But the AK-47 was just an unbelievable weapon that we had to oppose, and it was supplied by China and Russia. On the other hand, we'd be in the lowlands, we'd receive a lot of sniper fire. And if the sniper, we learned real quickly to determine by rifle fire what type of weapon was being used against us. If it was a carbine, we kept walking. If it was an M16, we kept walking. If it was an AK-47, we hit the ground just as fast as we could hit it. Because whoever had AK-47s knew how to use them. They were marksmen. And quite often what we would do when we were pinned down with sniper fire, and I hope Mike will address this for you, we would call in artillery, not knowing where the snipers are, but a general area where it's coming from. And once the artillery came in, then we would get up and move and go on our way to our destination. But the different rifle sounds, we became so familiar with it, we knew what weapons were being fired at us. They also had machine guns, the NVA did, that were like our M60 machine guns. They were devastating. And sometimes they had our M60 machine guns that they had captured and were using against us. Other things we carried, like I said, smoke grenades, fragmentation grenades, food, most of it was sea rations. Once in a while, they would give us what we called LRPs, long range patrol. It was a a dry bag of food that you had to water to, where sea rations were in cans. Poncho liner, you probably have heard nothing about a poncho liner. It was size of a poncho, and it had some type of insulation in it. We could wrap up in that at night, particularly out in the mountains, and it would keep us warm. And if we were wet, it would withhold the heat, and our clothes would dry out as a result. It was our blanket. You might say it was our security blanket. Everybody had a poncho liner. And an interesting story about that is when I joined the company, they didn't have one issued it. So I was flown out to our unit. I was on top of the hill. And the first night I about froze to death. The fog came in, it was raining, it was chilly. I was on guard duty at my foxhole hole, shaking like a leaf. And I was trying to wrap up in towels to keep warm. And the next morning, there was a guy that was leaving the unit. He was going back home, and he gave me his poncho liner. So I did have a poncho liner from there on to wrap up in and stay warm with. And when I checked out, the day I checked out of the company to go home, the guy said, "You don't have a poncho liner to return to me." And I said, "That's right, I gave it to someone, I passed it on, someone didn't have it." He said, you cannot leave without giving me one. And I said, "Well, if you check the records, I was never issued one." And he said, "And also, this is not the M16 that you were issued." And I said, "That's right. You need to go get your M16 returned." And so he was a typical guy in the rear, supplier. So I said, "Wait a minute. If you want my M16, I think there's some NVA or VC running around with it, and you go get it. I'm turning in a rifle, and I'm going home. And for the poncho liner, I don't have one." So they could have asked you no matter where you were or what you were doing. But the really important thing that we carried, even more so than food, was water. Sometimes we carried up to 3 canteens of water, just because if we're going to be out searching for the enemy, we could be out there for weeks. And you can go without food for a pretty long stretch, but you cannot go without water. You need to try to keep your body hydrated. So water is really an important item. And one time we were in the mountains, they could not get us resupply for 3 days. So all of us were running out of water, and we ran into a stream, and we started filling up our canteens. And then resupply came in, and the helicopter was bringing in resupply, brought in a big tube of water to drop. So they dropped the water at that time while we're in the river filling our canteens with river water. So it was a little late, but I guess it was better than never. Mail. I want to tell you, mail meant so much to us. And you might wonder, how did we mail stuff out? So what most of us did is kept our writing materials in envelopes in a sealed plastic bag and kept it in a rucksack. And when we put the envelope, all we had to do was write "free" in the right-hand corner where the stamp would go, because there was no way we could have stamps out there or anything else. But mail was just really critical for us, word from home. So I'm going to move on. I got it here, okay. This gives you, I wanted this slide in here to just give you an idea what the mountains were like. Out over there, that's all triple canopy forest. And the mountains were very steep. So they'd look on a map and they'd say, "Okay, you're here and we want you there. by 3 o'clock this afternoon. There were sometimes we physically could not get there. We just couldn't do it. That's once again, I'm just trying to point out the mountains. We are on a mountain right there. We were sent out and started building a base camp in the mountains. It's called LZ Park. And that was a friend of mine who I think made it through and got home safely. This area here is what I was talking about, the beach area. And that's South China Sea. And as I said, that was full of booby traps and so forth. And there you can see I have my rucksack on my back. I have a black t-shirt on. During the day, we usually just wore a t-shirt. It was either olive drab, the green, or it was black. We could buy the black from the kids in the villages now. They would always try to sell us cigarettes and all kinds of stuff. This is one of the bunkers that got built on LZ Park in the mountains. And if you could see all these wires going out, those are wires leading to the mines that we set out in front of our positions. I'm sorry, sometimes I kind of lose it here. The Claymore mines. But in front of that bunker, we probably had about 5 or 6 of them set out. And the rumor was that the North Vietnamese wanted to get that fire base out of there, and they, come hell or high water, they were going to overrun it. So we were rocketed off often. We actually, later on, we were attacked. I was on guard duty, but the attack took place exactly behind me on the other side of the perimeter. And actually they got in the perimeter. They drug a sergeant down to the wire trying to take him prisoner, but he was a pretty big guy. He fought off about 3 of them and got himself back up the hill to the bunker. And they blew up the command post. They blew up several bunkers. They were able to infiltrate into the perimeter. And when the enemy's in your perimeter, you don't know where you can shoot or what you can shoot, because you got the enemy all around you, and so you stay put and try and defend your area. But there could have been an enemy coming up right behind us. I just wanted to show this to you. That's an M60 machine gun. That was the biggest firepower that we had on the ground. I mean, our machine gunners were so important to us, and the enemy knew that. So unfortunately, when they attacked us, that was one of their main targets. So if you were the machine gunner, and I carried an M16, I'm in this picture just trying to get a picture of it. If you were the machine gunner, I've read some books that were written by Marines that said in actual combat, life expectancy was 3 to 5 seconds for them. Because that was the main firepower for troops on the ground. This is also, I'm on another fire base. This is another type of bunker that was flat land, so it wasn't built into a hillside. But you could just see all the sandbags and stuff like that. And we were on a fire base. We got to go on a fire base. We pulled the security for the fire base for maybe 3 or 4 days. Then we had to go back out the bush. That was like the safest place we could be. But those fire bases would get rocketed quite often, and the enemy would try to infiltrate through the concertina wire and so forth. And I just want to mention this fellow's name was Hank. He was wounded in action. This fellow's name is Ramos. He was killed in action. And that's me on the side. And I don't know how many of you are Christian, but I kept a rosary around my neck for full 12 months, just hoping it'd give me some protection. And I'm Catholic, so. This is just another picture I was trying to show you, fire base. And I want to show you, we did have African Americans in our unit. This was a pretty nice guy. His name was Dwight. This is Phil Arlotta that I showed earlier. Actually, the first time I walked Point in the Mountains, I came to, I was walking Point for the company, and I came to a area that to get through, it looked like it was part of an airplane that must have been shot down. And as you walk through it, it was like you step on metal, it was going to make a noise. So I was thinking that could be early warning system for the enemy. It might be right up ahead. And actually, an experienced African-American black man came up front, and he said, "Bob, I'll do it. I'll take us through it." And so he was the lead man, and I was second man. And of course, we were checking it out to make sure if there was any booby traps, we could spot it. But I'll never forget that guy really did step forward and didn't have to do it. And he knew I didn't have enough experience yet, and he took it from there. This is one of my favorite pictures. And I want to tell you why. That's Korean beer. I have a cigar in my mouth. I am on a bunker protecting a bridge on Highway 1, and there is not an ounce of fat on me. It's just a wonderful picture. I love that picture. This is what a fire base looks like from a helicopter up above. And when we were on this fire base, which my company started building, the NVA back here in the mountains had a loudspeaker system, and they started playing some songs to try to make us homesick. And they played "Where Have All the Flowers Gone," "Oh Susanna," and then our forward observer cut loose with artillery and started bombing the place all over in here. We didn't know where it was coming from to try to shut them up. But they were actually playing these American tunes, hoping it would make us more homesick. The reason I got this picture is a couple of interesting points. Larry Techmeyer I really respected him on the field. He was really good. His father died while he was over there, so they sent him home for the funeral. We didn't think we'd see him again, but he did. They did bring him back to Vietnam, of which afterwards he was killed on that fire base 411, stopping the enemy from coming through a hole in the perimeter. So he was just a heck of a guy. Now, this was a lieutenant whose MOS was combat engineer, and he volunteered to go into the infantry. And so he was the only time he had an officer in charge of our platoon. All the other times it was a sergeant who had been in country. He came out to our unit, last about 3 weeks, and then he was gone. He went back to the combat engineers. He got the heck out of there. And in fact, I wonder if he came out just to earn the combat infantryman's badge, CIB, so he could wear it, and then he went back, never saw him again. Either that or he decided there was no place to be, there was no fun out there. I want to show this slide because that's Joseph Kelly. At one point, he was sergeant of our platoon. He was also killed in action on July 1st, 1969. And along with me, there's a fellow named Bob McCoy. He was in our platoon, good guy. He was killed July 2nd, 1969, day after Kelly was killed. When you're in the service, and I know a lot of you serve, whenever somebody meets someone close to home, you kind of buddy up to them and get to know them in that. I was from St. Louis, and this fellow, Jim Shelton, was from Kansas City. And so that was close enough that he and I became pretty good friends. Jim wound up being the radio operator for the company. Whenever the company was out, he was out in the command with the captain and whoever. But he didn't have to go out on patrols for like platoons or squad patrols. So if the company wasn't out, he was in a more secure position. He was a good guy. He did get home. I thought this would be interesting, and Mike can probably address this much better than me. That's called a Cobra helicopter. And you can just see, I can't tell you all the guns on this thing, but I'm telling you, when these helicopters came in to give us support, I mean, there were trees that started falling from the stuff that they threw down at the enemy, and guns, machine guns, rockets, all kinds of stuff. And at the time, this was the top combat helicopter for the Army. I don't even think this thing would exist today with the stuff they got.
Hey,
This
Bob?
is just a side view. Yeah, Mike.
I was going to say, on the bottom you had these two, looked like Gatling guns on the bottom of that, right here and here on the, below the cockpit.
Oh, yeah.
Got a couple of, right here and right here, a couple of Gatling guns. That'll get attention.
Mike, do you remember how many rounds that gun would put out in just a minute or seconds?
Yeah. Bob, I'm gonna go off the top of my head and say I remember the number of 6,000 rounds a minute.
I mean, I believe that. It was
That's the
unbelievable.
rate.
And I got to tell you, we were almost always outmaneuvered by the enemy, being that they were in position when we came along, so they were ready for us, or they were the NBA they were in position, they were going to stay and fight. And our support from the air was critical for us, just critical. And I really look forward to Mike covering more than just this, how he guided artillery and stuff like that to help the ground troops. Can I move on, Mike? Or did you want something else on this? Can I move
I
on?
hear that, Bob.
This is the normal helicopter that we rode in. It's called the Huey. I want to get a picture and show you. This fellow right here is probably a machine gunner, and the next, on each side of it, there was a guy with an M60 machine gun on the helicopter, and these helicopters were used to pick up troops and take us in for a combat assault. And we could get maybe 6, 7, 8 at the most of us runs on that helicopter. And when I was on my first lift into a landing area that we didn't know if it'd be hot or what, the helicopter guys, the gunmen, opened up, and I thought we must have been also receiving fire. So my knees are knocking together, knowing I got to jump out of that thing when it gets close enough to the ground. And the co-pilot turned around and he says, "Cold LZ." Well, I finally figured out wherever they took the troops in, they would cut loose on the landing area and recon would fire every time. So the guys, the pilot or the co-pilot was going to have to tell us if it was a hot LZ, meaning they're receiving fire back, or if it's cold LZ. So at least from that point on, I could expect that these machine gunners were going to cut loose before I hit the ground. One time, they took us into an area, and the elephant grass, I don't know, was about this high. So they took us in about 3 feet above it. I didn't realize the elephant grass was that high. So I jump out, and from the air, from this helicopter, I did a complete somersault, hit the ground. And then with all the elephant grass, I couldn't see the guy in front of me where he went, so I had to hurry up, pick up my stuff, and catch up because I didn't want to be left alone. But it was about a 10-foot jump that I did not expect. This is from the side, this way they got, I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Bob, can I interject real quick?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say that when I get into my slides, remember that chopper right there. Just remember this. This is a Huey, and so remember that, and we'll talk about it a little bit later.
Okay. But that's how resupply came into us. In fact, that's what they got loaded. I just want to show this slide because likewise, there was Bob Swindle. He was killed in action. This is what the native people out in the rice paddies lived in. This was their home. Mud floor. These people were really poor. And when we were working rice paddies, one of the things I noticed, the peasants would be out there working the field, the rice fields. And no matter how close we thought we were getting to them, we never closed that distance. So I never quite knew if they were the enemy watching us or if they were real peasants out there working the field. Once again, this was a bridge over Highway 1 that we were trying to protect. That's Bob Swindle. He was killed. That's me. That's 3 other guys. When we had a chance, we'd get our shirts off and try to dry out and get some sun and so forth. I was out in the field with the infantry unit for 7 months. And then I was up on top of a hilltop. The company, we were out maneuvering as a company. And Jim Sheldon came to me and he said, Bob, they just radioed us from base camp, LC Bronco. When the resupply helicopter gets in, you're supposed to get on it and go back to Bronco. I said, oh, okay. And he asked me, he said, what did you do? I said, I have no idea. I've been over here with the company. So anyway, the resupply helicopter came in, picked me up. They were going back to Bronco, our base camp. So I hitched the ride with them. I get back there, I report to our company headquarters, and they said, oh, you need to go see Captain Blanks. That's this guy right here. And I said, okay, and he's 2 hooches down. So I went down 2 hooches, got my rucksack on, I'm filthy, coming in from the field. I walked in, and he said, sit down. He said, I got a couple questions for you. He asked me, how much of the Vietnamese language do you know? And I said, well, sir, I know what I've learned out in the field. How much do you know about their culture and what they're like and all? I said, sir, I only know what I learned out in the field. And he's like, okay. Then he finally asked, can you drive a blank Jeep? I said, yes, sir. Okay, you got the job. So I had to ask him, I said, sir, what's the job? You're going to be my assistant. I'm heading up civilian affairs. I said, okay, I'll take it. But this was a North Vietnamese soldier who had Chu Hoi to us. And he started working with Captain Blanks and me. He was what they call the Kit Carson Scout. I never knew if I could trust him, but he never caused any problem. and really couldn't communicate too well without a interpreter from South Vietnamese troops with us. But he was a nice guy. I got another picture of him later, further on. This was a South Vietnamese soldier that worked with us in civilian affairs. And many times in civilian affairs, what we set up is a medical camp in what we thought was a friendly village to come in and treat the people of their wounds, their sickness, whatever their medical problems were, which were many. And I have no doubt we even probably treated some VC and didn't know it. So he was a South Vietnamese soldier, did all the interpreting between us and the villages. And this is the North Vietnamese soldier that I just talked about that traveled with us. His name's Tao, that's North Vietnamese soldier. I took his picture in our bunker the night before I caught a helicopter to start my process home. I often wonder what happened when North Vietnamese took the country over. He was probably killed, I don't know. You know, his chance of survival would have been really slight. And I just want to point out, see, I really did wear a rosary around my neck. It was done. This is a pretty happy picture. I'm going home next day. I think I'm gonna make it. So I'm in a pretty good mood. We never wore our names or any of the stripes or anything out in the field. But with civilian affairs, since I wasn't in the infantry, I could get a couple sets of fatigues, and I could sew my rank on and things like that. And I love this picture because this is from 1970 after I got home. That's my wife Mary and I, and that's an engagement picture taken on her front porch, and she is here today somewhere out there. And she's been real sporty all along. After 53 years of marriage and 5 kids, 13 grandkids, she still lets me come home. I did, early on in the 80s, I got to visit the Vietnam War. And just a quick story about that. We went to Washington, D.C. with our youngest daughter. The rest of them had school and had to stay home. And we stayed at Mary's cousin's house. And her husband told me, he said, Bob, when you go to the memorial, it's going to be emotional. And I said, okay, I understand that. So we went to the memorial. They let us use the car. It was on a Sunday. We went to the memorial. First time I saw it, I walked up and down. Nothing. I felt numb. Then they had these books where you can look names up and have to find out what panel someone was on that was killed. So I did that. I looked at those different panels with Techmeyer, Kelly, Bob McCoy on, and so forth. Nothing. So I turned to Mary and I said, you know, I forgot that Kelly was killed July 1st and McCoy was killed July 2nd. And I broke. I just plain broke all of a sudden. And I held my wife and she held me for I don't know how long. And I felt like I could sit there at the memorial all night. But we had little Susan with us and we couldn't do that. At the memorial, I don't know how many of you have seen it, but there's the 3 soldiers statue. If you ever see it, I did look at that, and it's very realistic of how we dressed, what guys did, what they wore, and everything else. So it's, you know, sometimes they do something on a statue and it's not reality. This was really well done, I thought. Okay, at this time, Mike was up here. Here's an officer. And I was a local grunt. So I was at the bottom. But there is something that's really amazing. Mike and I went to the same high school, and my brother Bill, he was a classmate of mine. Mike had 5 children. We had 5 children. Mike's got 13 grandkids. We got 13 grandkids. So somehow that gap has been narrowed. Okay, Mike, it's up to you.
My introduction, I thank Bob. Thank you very much for the a few slides here. Just wanted to get everybody to understand who we were. These are not a generation. You see up there on the slide. These are the people that were born between the 1925 and 1945. And we had a certain set of values that were kind of handed down from our parents, and we had a strong work ethic and things of that nature. But I was born and raised in St. Louis, as Bob said, the classmate of Bill's out there. Went through high school, and if you look to the right, you'll see a picture of a young black lady right there. That is, now my mind just went blank. The one below her is Chuck Berry, and the Tina Turner, I'm sorry, is the one above her. There's a lot of stories about how Tina Turner and I crossed paths years ago. It was, that's another story I think we'll cover some other time. So if you look to the right in about the 10 o'clock position, what you're looking at is an O-1 Bird Dog. The mission of the O-1 Bird Dog of the Air Force O-1 Bird Dog was as a forward air controller, which is, as it sounds, the job was to control air assets, artillery, indirect fires in support of Bob and the guys on the ground. I'll get into it a little bit more. That's the picture of me to the right when I was 69, I guess it was, and I have to apologize. I'm not as good looking as Bob, but I'll just take credit for being there and getting home. One of the airplanes I flew prior to going to Vietnam was the Lockheed Constellation. That's in the lower right-hand corner of that picture. That the airplane had been around for a long time. I think it first came out in the 50s. So I had a lot of time in recip airplanes. I went to college, by the way, and I went up to this college in Kansas called St. Benedict's, and now called Benedictine College. Great school. And so I worked on the railroad while I was in college. I did all the things that many of us did in those days, and that was to work every little job you could find just to make a few bucks. And especially since I got married in my senior year, I loved the job on the railroad because it paid very well. But I still wanted to travel, so I got back in my mind that I needed to go off and join the Air Force. I went to the Air Force at a 20-year career. I had 2 tours in Vietnam, one in that airplane on the bottom right there, and my second tour was in the one in the top left, which is the O-1 Bird Dog. In my 20 years in the military, I did fly 11 different airplanes. I was also qualified in gliders, ran a glider program for the Air Force Officer Training School. And then I also got time in a couple of helicopters that guys let me fly. They put me in the right seat in Vietnam and said, okay, you want to fly this? And off we go. And, what did I know? After my Air Force career, I joined 4 large corporations in the process and 5 startup companies. I mean, in the large corporation category, you look at Lockheed Martin, Ford Aerospace, companies like that. So, my startup companies, they're interesting because, I took one into bankruptcy, another one just rolled over and died. One of them was highly successful. And by the way, if you do get a copy of that book, it's up in the upper left-hand corner there. It's on Amazon. If you do get a copy, it will explain all the various ups and downs of my career in the Air Force and out. Next slide, please. Okay, so Bob showed you his area of operation, and it's I was south of Bob. There is I don't know if this cursor works, but this is the area called Pleiku. Bob was to the north of that. He was up in just north of me. I really worked the southern area down in an area called Garlock Province and Quang Duc Province along the Cambodian border. I was assigned to a forward operating base in the town of Gia Nia in the Central Highlands. To the lower left, you see my hooch and compound, and it was not unlike what Bob was living in, except I think I had a little bit better than Bob because I was Air Force, you know. There was no golf course close by, but we did our best. And that's my hooch there. And to get more specific and into more details, you'll look to the gray and kind of gray looking map here. This is the area. This is Giania. You'll see that name. You'll see Duk Lop up here. And then if you go to the lower right-hand side, you'll see Duk Lop again. And I'm going to get into and tell you about something that happened to me on Thanksgiving Day 54 years ago. Just around the Duk Lop Special Forces camp. May I have the next slide, please. So understand something, as Bob was talking, he's talking as what we call a grunt's point of view. He was on the ground, right in the middle of it, and I did not envy him his job one bit, believe me. My job was, if you think about the way the military operates, we operate in a combined arms style, meaning everybody is supporting everybody else. So Bob's on the ground. Bob had helicopter gunships. Bob had artillery that someone could adjust for him. He could adjust himself as well. But he also had the Air Force above the ground assets. And the Air Force in Vietnam operated with this particular airplane, which I've shown a couple of pictures here, a couple of destroyed ones, but that's me in front of my airplane. It's a spotter airplane, a small single-engine Cessna. And our job was to direct fighter bombers that would be bombing and doing scraping and doing all the bombing in Vietnam. That was my job, was to control those fighters onto the target. And because I was helping the guy on the ground, I was talking to him, the guy on the ground, over the FM radio. I was talking to the fighters that I was controlling overhead. I was talking to him simultaneously on a UHF radio. And at the same time, I was talking to my team back here at this talk, and I was talking to their tactical control center back here. I was talking to them on a VHF radio. So communications-wise, I was really busy. And if you had troops in contact, meaning Bob and his team were out there slugging it out, and they needed air support. I was a busy, these guys were busy on the ground, but I was really busy trying to spot where they were, make sure the guy that came in with the fighter bomber didn't drop a short round, meaning didn't drop ammunition too close to the friendlies or on the friendly troops. So I'm going to quickly discuss what happened here. So this is not me, but another pilot on short final going into the airstrip at Giania. It was essentially a dirt strip. They threw some oil down on it to kind of keep the dirt down. This is me to the right of that. In my combat gear, I'm getting ready to jump in an airplane and take off. You'll notice that I'm carrying in my left hand there a Car 15. It was a collapsible stock semi or full automatic machine gun, an AR-15 derivative. I kept that in the front seat with me on the side. In the back seat, I would typically carry extra water. I carried an M79 grenade launcher, which looks like a big shotgun, firing 40 millimeter round. I carried that in the back seat. Don't ask me why. Well, I'll tell you why. I used to like to shoot it out of the window of the airplane to see if I could hit a target or something like that. But the M79 was just my go-to. Then I would carry smoke rockets on the 8 smoke rockets in the wings And I think you saw that in one of the previous slides, the smoke rockets under the wings. There's 8 of those. Those were for marking the target so that the fighter bombers, when they came in, knew where I wanted them to hit or bomb. So I would usually direct their vision and their bomb dropping or napalm or gun shooting or whatever. I would direct that from that white to a smoke rocket at the foot around. So they see that white phosphorus smoke, and I would say, 100 meters to the right, give me 2 Mark 500s, something like that. 250-pound bomb, 500-pound bomb, or whatever. So just to clear up the rest of these little pictures here, this airplane, which is the same one, just a different view, this airplane was, we were overrun, our compound, our airfield, not the compound, but the airfield and the Mountain Yard Village was overrun on April the 1st of 1969. The picture on the lower right-hand side is the Mountain Yard Village in flames. Somebody had, some staffer had gone in and dropped a satchel charge in the back window of this 01 Bird Dog and blew it in half. This is a view of me looking from the airport down into my compound. So it was about maybe a mile or so driving a Jeep to hot the town off that airfield into that back to my compound. Let's see, next slide, please. So this is kind of the crux of my story, if you will. I call it the turkey shoot, and it's in the book, by the way. So it was Thanksgiving Day, 1969. And by the way, as I'm telling the story, I want you to think of Bob being on the ground and needing to combine arms to help, support his activity. So it's Thanksgiving Day, 1969. I left, flew out of an area called Bandy-Tuit. It's a Central Islands, one of the territorial capitals there. Flew out of Bandy-Tuit because the guys in the Hip-Hop Special Forces camp had been taking fire all night. There were sappers and there were people probing their perimeter. They were trying to get in. Unfortunately, my airplane didn't have any instruments to be able to fly at night. We navigated around strictly using maps. We would read the terrain. That's how we navigated into positions in various areas around South Vietnam. And so what would happen would be, I was supposed to take off at first light, like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. I did manage to be airborne around 7:30, as I recall, 8 o'clock possibly. And I made my way about 20 minutes to the southwest of Bandy-Tuit, and there was the Special Forces camp in Gupop. Now, as I approached the Special Forces camp, the problem became that the weather had basically lowered down and was sitting on the high terrain around the camp. And the camp was in a kind of a valley, a small valley. And I couldn't get in. I couldn't get into that valley because I was blocked by the weather. The weather was, and as I said, the airplane, I didn't have instrumentation to navigate through that weather, so, we get easily disoriented flying an airplane without an instrument. So what I decided to do was go back to Bandy-Tuit and wait for the weather to rise and burn off a little bit. But as I was heading back, I wasn't even a minute heading back, and I realized that the terrain to my north was fairly clear. So I thought maybe there was a way to get into that valley circuitously. So I took and turned left, went north. I did a time and distance check. I did about a minute or two, and then hit the stopwatch and turned left. The weather was still above me, and I went west for a while, and now I'm getting scared because I'm thinking, maybe the Cambodian border, maybe I'm over the border. So I just said, okay, I'm turning south. I turned south, now I'm heading back south toward the area where the Special Forces camp is located. And so as I'm approaching that Special Forces camp, the weather's getting lower and lower again. And so just about the time I thought to myself, I'm looking at monkeys in the trees. That's how low I was flying. And just about that time, I break out into this little valley. I couldn't believe I made it. And so off I go. I'm in this valley. I'm flying probably an average of about 400 feet above the terrain. And so I'm flying. I contact the Special Forces camp. I said, what's going on? How, what can I do? They said, we got enemy troops near the runway, got enemy troops to our west, got enemy troops to our north, and da-da-da. So they give me some direction of where they were taking fire from. So what I did, I called up a couple of artillery fire bases, and I started adjusting artillery. I adjusted artillery for, I'm thinking, close to 2 hours. I'm putting artillery in around the airfield in known locations of enemy positions, trenches, and things of that nature. There was a friendly, what would you call a kind of a outside the wire group that was up on a little remote volcano. It was a volcano that had been burned out years ago. It had a rim around it. It was a little bit above the terrain. And on that position, there was a friendly group, of special forces guys who I think they were doing monitoring of radios and things of that nature. Anyway, so the diplomat camp and this little friendly, outpost, if you will, contact outpost was up on this hill, this little volcano. I'm working between them. And I'm working between them, directing artillery, and at the same time I'm directing artillery, I'm getting everybody and their uncle is trying to shoot me down. So that weapon in the lower right center there is called a Dishka. The 51 caliber Russian Chinese made anti-aircraft gun. That's an anti-aircraft gun. I had two of those guys trying to get me. One was near the airfield, the other one was behind me over by a road that went back to Bambi to it. And so I would watch these green tracers. They would come flying up at me, and it looked like a snake. So it looked like a ribbon. The Mason 10, Thanksgiving Day parade. This ribbon of guns and ammunition coming flying up at me. The other weapon that was being used on me was, as Bob had alluded to, the issue weapon, if you will, to the NVA and to most of the communist bloc nations was that AK-47. A very accurate, very deadly weapon, fired, I think, a 7.62 type of, maybe a 7.80 some round. It was quite powerful. I had already had about, I'm thinking, 6 or 8 of those bullets went through the tail of my airplane, and you can always know it because the tail of the airplane was bumpy, you'd gotten hit. The big thing is, at least they didn't put one through me. That was my wish for the day. Anyway, so what happens is, as I'm moving around, 2 hours have gone by, maybe two, and I get a call from the Special Forces camp. They said, we've got a couple of helicopter gunships. Now, remember that Huey gunship that Bob had pointed out, and I say a gunship is because it was really they did have rocket launchers on it, and they did have those 2 door gunners shooting, out either side of that Huey, but they would carry troops, they would carry supplies and other things as well. But I get 2 of these helicopters check in with me, and I said, be really careful, guys. I said, the area is hotter than hell. It's just, there's all kinds of small arms, all kinds of 51 cal, and there's a lot of things going on. And so what I didn't realize is these 2 helicopters were being flown by the bravest young men I've ever met. A couple of warrant officers, probably 19, 20 years old, but these guys were good. Unfortunately, they didn't pay attention to what I told them. I said, if you're going to run in and shoot your gun or your rocket, make sure your run-in heading is this heading, because that's the safest heading you can be on. Well, they didn't pay much attention to me. They were just going to get the job done somewhere. And so they swung off. The first guy that was, I'm going to call him Wolfpack 1. He was the first one in, and he comes down, he makes a right turn right in front of me, and I'm at the same altitude he is, and he makes his gun run, his rocket run, and as he turns to the right to pull off, he says, I'm hit, I'm going down. So he got shot down pretty quick. Boom, he lands, crash, he managed to auto-rotate, crash, land, you know, I mean, probably 200 yards from what is a known enemy position. Anyway, I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. So the second guy, the second Wolfpack number 2, Wolfpack 2, he says, oh my God, my lead's been shot down. I gotta pull this guy out. So I said, well, hold on, let's not go crazy here. So I tried to control the environment. I said, we're gonna have to pull him out. There's no way we're gonna get friendly troops in there to get these guys out. You're gonna have to get him. So the helicopter, I rolled in on a gun run and a pass where I unloaded my smoke rocket just to maybe 200 yards from this downed helicopter crew, who, by the way, had bailed out, and they're shooting everything in sight. And once they saw where I was putting my smoke rockets in, they realized, well, that's where the bad guys must be. So they started shooting into the area of this tree line. It was like a banana tree, a bunch of banana trees. So what happens next is that the Wolfpack number 2, I said, I'm going to go in, I'll put these smoke rockets down, and kind of, I mean, they're not going to do much damage, but they're going to at least cause, they're going to be, supersonic rockets, and they'll blow up and explode, maybe cause a little bit of chaos in the area. And then when I do that, I said, you come down behind me, and then you roll in, maybe you can pick these guys up. So that's exactly what we did. And then I put the rockets down, I swung back around, and here comes Wolfpack 2, and so he's going down the line to pick up and land, to pick up this other helicopter that's been shot down, Wolfpack 1. I rolled in, and I've got my AR-15, my PAR-15, hanging out the side window, and I'm shooting a lot up this tree line. I have no idea if I'm hitting anything. I'm trying to fly the airplane with my knees and my feet, talk on the radio to these guys, and shoot this gun out the side window. And I was thinking, yeah, I hope I hit something. I don't know if I did or not. Anyway, the 2 rolls in, he stops, he gets these guys on the airplane, 4 of them, and they take off. Now they're really overweight, and on top of that, number 2 had been hit 3 or 4 times as well, so he's not flying real well. But he manages to get airborne. He goes about a quarter of a mile and makes his right turn over this road. And he made that right turn over the road, and just on the other side of the road was one of these Ziska 51 calibers. He was so low and so close to him that the 51 caliber never saw him coming, and he flew right over the top of it, made a right turn, and went up the road, heading back to Bambi to it. Now about this time, I'm thinking to myself, I gotta get out of here. I look at my watch. Now my airplane holds 4.5 hours of fuel. I've been flying for 4 hours and 35 or 40 minutes. And I'm thinking, and I'm looking at my fuel tanks, they're both empty. And I'm thinking, well, I'm gonna have to land on this road at some point. So off I go, heading back toward Bambi to it. I get about 1,000, I managed to climb up to about 1,000 feet. And I saw the runway at Bambi to it. I chopped the power, dropped the flaps, and then just headed for that runway. And I touched down that runway, and as I went to turn off, the engine quit, and I was completely out of gas. I mean, another minute, and it wouldn't have worked. Anyway, here's what the epilogue, I guess you'd call it, to the story. So, as I'm coming off and I'm trying to get back, this helicopter comes back by me, and there's this number 2 guy, and I see these 8 young men hanging out the side, giving me a thumbs up, and I thought to myself, this is what it's all about, folks. Absolutely what it's all about. Taking care of your brothers in a combat situation. That's the way we work. So here's the epilogue. I get out of the military, I return to civilization, or as we used to say, we're back to the land of Big DX, the basic exchange. And anyway, so there I am, and I'm working for a company called Ford Aerospace, and I'm in the you know, at the airport, Dulles Airport, and it's 1972, and I think it was probably September or so. And I'm sitting there, and I get a phone call. It's been 43 years since this episode happened, and I kind of, you let things like that kind of go. I get a phone call, and the phone call is from a guy that says, "Hey, I run a website for an Army fixed wing group," and he says there's been a guy who used to fly with with these helicopters, and he's been looking for somebody. He says, "I think it's you," because the reason they even knew about it was I had gone on a website of a friend of mine and related this story, and I guess he put this thing on the internet. It went out on the internet, and I guess a few people saw it, and this young man, no, not so young anymore, who was the crew chief, door gunner on the airplane, on the helicopter, that had been shot down. He had been trying to track me down for 43 years to say thank you. So here's, I'll take the next slide, please. Well, okay, there's the date right there. So by the way, if you go back one slide, I'll just point out to me, I think I missed one, there you go. So you see this airplane is upside down and backward and all shot full of holes. That's an 01 Bird Dog, and that was at the Boot Camp Special Forces Camp, which I also supported. This guy, both pilots survived. We had one in the front, one in the back. And he was giving the guy an orientation ride around the area, and he went over into Cambodia, straight over, and he took a 37 millimeter round right through